I'm Laurie Carlson. I'm the chair of the Forum on Tolerance Committee. So thank you so much for coming today for hopefully a productive discussion on the state of women's rights in the United States as of 2022. Hopefully we'll all stay respectful but have an engaging conversation. And I first would like to introduce our current Vice Provost of North Shore Community College and my friend and wonderful person, Andrea DeFusco-Sullivan.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Carlson. I wanted to give a brief message of welcome to all of you who are here in the Lynn gym or who are attending virtually. You are welcome at North Shore Community College. We welcome all kinds of ideas and all kinds of discourse. So whether you are visiting us to use our fabulous library learning commons, or you're interested in taking a class, or just talking more to some of the fabulous professors we have in attendance, you are welcome. That's my message number one. My second message is, please vote. Democracy neglected is democracy lost. Whatever your opinions are, please exercise your right to vote on issues that are important to you. If they're important to you, they're important to us. So thank you for showing your engagement by being here today. I'm very proud to introduce the 48th Forum on Tolerance. We're not there yet, still fighting against sexism and misogyny in the United States. It is sobering and sad and enraging that we still have to be talking about these kinds of issues in 2022. If you are upset, please channel that energy into something productive, whether it is speaking with one of your professors, an advisor, civic action, or simply by voting or learning more. Again, we are glad you're here. Welcome. And I'd like to turn over the day to our panelists. Dr. Laurie Carlson introduced the program. She is a longtime proponent of the Forum on Tolerance and a champion for a number of academic areas, including English, interdisciplinary studies, and gender and women's studies, as well as environmental science. Professor Wanda Pothier-Hill also is a professor in our English department, our first year foundational literacy department, and our gender and women's studies department. Dr. Jennifer Harris is one of our coordinators of our Commonwealth Honors Program. She is our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Social Justice Faculty Fellow, and she is a professor of the Behavioral Sciences Department. Finally, Dr. Kara Kaufman has led, along with Professor Dr. Larry Davis, our alliance with Harvard University, and an alliance that also, and you'll hear more about this in future forums on tolerance, is focused on social justice in Eastern Europe. She is a member of the History Department, a professor there, and also is one of the founding members of the Gender and Women's Studies Department. Many of you who are faculty will know her as one of the fellows in the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Innovation. She is wonderful, as are all of our presenters today. I'm looking forward to today. I will see you in Zoom. Have a wonderful morning.
And so right now we're going to show a brief clip. It's kind of satirical from Saturday Night Live, and then we'll do some intro remarks and then move on to a longer 18-minute clip that talks about the state of our country after Roe was overturned.
In the not-too-distant future, the world is a dystopia. Women are enslaved.
Okay, so as I said, I thought it would be nice if each of us just kind of went around and just gave like an opening remark, just talking about what that silly satirical video made us think of in general in relation to the state of women's rights in the U.S. So we'll just go in order, I think, starting over here. We'll start with Wanda.
Hi. When I first saw the clip, I kind of harkened back to different things that have happened in this country when where it doesn't directly impact us, we tend to not be as aware of it. And I think where there's a lot of people that feel kind of secure because we're in the state of Massachusetts, they're like, okay, our women's rights are protected and so forth. But, I mean, I feel like this is just kind of the tip of the scale, and if we don't work really hard to protect our democracy, we're in big trouble.
Thanks, Wander. So I am Laurie Carlson, and so that clip actually is from 2017, so it's 5 years ago, and it's when *Handmaid's Tale* was first coming out on Hulu. It's kind of depressing all that's happened from 2017. *Handmaid's Tale* is a book that I used to teach a lot. It was made in 1980, written in 1984, and the whole point of science fiction. Oops, sorry, I think I got too close to the mic or something. Science fiction is meant to have it's supposed to be far away from reality enough that it helps us look at an issue differently. That's kind of the point of science fiction. It denaturalizes the natural, so we look at it in a different way. I can't do that anymore with *Handmaid's Tale* because I think we're living *Handmaid's Tale*, and I'm not saying that to be like funny. And I think one thing that clip does a really good job of doing is, one, showing that we live in a white supremacist capitalist society that keeps people so tired that it's really hard for them to fight for their rights, first of all. Regardless of who you are, if you're anywhere in the lower class, the middle class, you're tired. We're all so very tired. But secondly, you can't care about women and not care about their rights. It's like if you think if you're a man, particularly if you're a white cisgender male, and you think that you're any kind of ally, you need to use your privilege to speak up right now, and to anyone who will listen, on women's rights. We cannot ever have equality if we live in a society where women have no autonomy to make medical decisions about their own body.
I really wish we had practiced this, because you took everything that I would ever say. I think I wanted, what struck for me, and it was personally, is as a Black person, as a person of color, hearing white people say there's no racism or that doesn't exist, because it doesn't affect them. And it's the same thing with this clip, that these men were treating these women like they were equal when the society had set it up for them to not be equal. And because it didn't affect them, they didn't acknowledge that disparity. And I think, to your point about using your privilege, I heard at some point about what empathy really is, and that empathy is not just feeling what the other person feels or understanding what the other person feels, but acknowledging that the other person's feelings are valid and their experience is valid. So when they said, oh, just fight back, it was a lack of acknowledgement of the reality that the women have. And I think it's even more complicated with sexism as opposed to racism, because sexism is so pervasive that we all accept it. We all sort of drink the Kool-Aid and are the fish in the water of sexism. So those men are in that water as well and are not able to see the oppression of women.
Hi, I'm Kara. When I saw that clip, I immediately thought about my classes. And at some point in all of my classes, I ask the students whether they consider themselves a feminist or not. And I've had really interesting answers that run the gamut of the answers. But one of the things that's been common about them all is that a lot of the women in the room say, no, that's like asking me if I'm a four-letter word. Feminism has become this horrible thing, like feminazis comes to mind, right? And the men in the room often are like, yeah, but I'm not a woman, so how can I be a feminist? And so then we have a conversation about what feminism is and what it means and all of that. And I usually have them read a very short thing that outlines what it was like to be a woman in 1970. And yes, we've had tremendous progress, but we, like the title, we are not there yet. We're not even close. And in fact, because of the Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court decision that took away the right to choose, we're going backwards. And so feminism is for everybody, no matter who you are and how you identify. And if this doesn't spark rage, that 50% of the population has had a right removed for the first time in U.S. history, I would do some reflecting on that.
Awesome. So we're about to cue. It's about an 18-minute documentary, which will lead to our first Q&A. This would be a really good time to grab some food because the food just came. So there is free food and beverage in the back.
What we didn't get was the coward's compromise that we were all braced for, right? The gaslighting decision that said, we're going to uphold a Mississippi 15-week ban, but not call it over.
An audience and the virtual audience, there is a mic over there that I think our forum committee member Carl will help get anyone if they'd like to raise their hand and ask a question. We're also happy to take questions over the Q&A function on Zoom that Michael will let us know if there's any questions. Or comments are great too, or just thoughts, feelings.
Okay. So, thank you very much for bringing this topic. More than a question, I kind of want to express what I was feeling while watching the video and your introductory points. So, in this country, like we seen the same group that took this right from women to be very forceful defending the right to bear arms. So the same people, so outside of the United States, like the world sees with horror that in the United States is a right to bear arms. People have the right. People don't have the right to education. Education is not a right in this country. Healthcare is not a right. And now, even women's freedom is not a right. So, for me, it's like that contradiction. And then the second point is, what is the driver of the decision? So, if you notice, like, the driver is like political ideology, and of course, with a purpose. This is like something that is being used because they want to drive a number of people through to keep voting for the same group, only because of this kind of point. So, and my third point is, if we look aside, even aside from divorce, you know what I mean? So, I just think about a right. It's a women's right. It's like a women's freedom. So I just want you kind to unveil that it doesn't have to be abortion. It is, and that's a very critical issue for women, but it's taking the freedom of the women to choose. I think that's, for me, that is very sad and problematic. I guess that's all what I want to express. Thank you very much.
If you wouldn't mind going over to the mic. Thank you. It would be good for the virtual audience.
Yeah, it'd be good for the virtual audience.
Okay. As educators, the biggest problem I see in the U.S. is the two-party system. Okay. Yes, you can talk about like Republican. There's a big part of them who kind of don't stand with the others, but they just fall within that. And the Democrats don't really do anything either. So how can us like really push when we vote and it doesn't feel like we do anything?
I think that's a really good point, and that's something they express in that documentary too. The Democrats let us down. This is not a like Republicans are evil. The Democrats aren't great either. Like people are fighting for votes rather than people's rights, and they absolutely could have codified Roe versus Wade if they had chosen to, but it would have required overturning the filibuster, which Democrats didn't want to do. It's really upsetting. I can't imagine what it's like to be a young person right now and just feel like, the two-party system is false. To me, a big thing would be trying to repeal the rights of companies to donate to politicians. That's Citizens United. It's been around now, I want to say, for 17 years. And that gave companies the freedom to be considered a person and to basically own politicians, at least from my point of view. And I mean, I think that's something, if I was a young person, I would try to reach out to any local representative I trusted and talk about how, if we're ever going to have a real political system or a real democracy, that's something that needed to be overturned.
But how can we do anything if these local Congress people might also be deep in the pockets of other corporations?
I mean, I think personally, we live in a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist society, respond to you not spending money. So maybe look into the companies that you give money to, and if it's somebody who does not support human rights and women's rights, don't buy stuff there. I mean, that is one small thing. I do think protests are helpful. I think putting your voice out there in any form is super helpful.
My area is psychology, and I teach social psych, which is in the middle between sociology and psychology. But I often, and my area is not political science either, so I do look at the individual and what we do individually. And I know what always disturbs me is the individual, that somebody voted for somebody who said that they would stack the court so they could overturn Roe. He said it. I don't know if people didn't believe it, but he said it, and people voted for him. So what is it saying about our mindset as a country? And actually, Carlos, you made me think of this. One of the things I think that's really complicated, and I was having this conversation with Laurie, is the role of religion and the disconnect we have in the United States, that we are a country that was based on the separation of church and state, yet we have freedom of religion, right? And sometimes I say maybe we should have sometimes freedom from religion, and that at some point that it's not just, you're talking about taking away people's rights, but from some of a religious space, they are saying we are protecting the unborn child, right? That's their mindset, is that we are protecting the unborn child. So we are in an educational institution, and part of me is like, that's part of my job, right? That's part of what I do here, to try to educate people. But I'm also hopeful with your generation that somehow you all got, say, the gender non-binary. You all got that. That came from you. That came from ground up, roots work. That mentality about gender is changed in your generation. What else can change? What else can change?
That's good.
I would also add that especially now, since the choice, well, not the choice, but whether or not abortion is going to be allowed is going to be a states' rights thing. I don't believe that. I think that's crap. I think once the Republicans get into office, they will make it a federal thing, but I digress. So if it is still a states' rights thing, the best thing you can do is get involved locally into local politics. And I know people say that all the time, but I actually witnessed this after Trump was elected. My husband, who's in the audience, my husband and I joined the North Andover Democrats because we were so angry and we were so lost. Like, what are we going to do? And we fought for our local representative, a Democrat, into the state office. Now, we're talking about Massachusetts, right? Okay. But that representative, her name is Christina, she was able to fight for so many rights on such a local level. For example, one of her cities is Lawrence. And she was able to fight on the local levels for so many things that Lawrence desperately needs. So if she can make that one person, right, can make such a difference in the local state representatives, and this is where the fight's going to go now, like that woman who is saying, I'm from Texas and I'm going to spend the rest of my life in jail if I get an abortion. The fight that you want to start with is your town or your city's city council, select board, what have you.
Laurie, there are a couple questions in the chat.
Okay, sure. Let's take one of the chat questions, then we'll go to that audience question, who the person who just raised their hand in a second.
Sorry, thank you. Just first, a brief comment. One person commented that she's wondering if she's the only one sitting there with tears in her eyes, and that as a woman, as a mother, it leaves her hollow. And then another comment is a question. Can you talk a little bit about how you think this moment in politics defines the bodies of queer women who might never need to seek this type of reproductive justice?
Does anybody want to start with that? I feel like...
Well, I can totally relate with the watching with tears in the eyes. First time I saw this and the first time I heard the news break, you know, it was heartbreaking. I have 2 daughters and a son who is a proud feminist. And knowing that their future could be altered drastically, you know, it's heartbreaking. But I believe in young people. If history has shown us anything, the people who affect change, that start these movements, tend to be majority young people that get in and say enough is enough.
I mean, I think the question was, how could it affect women as a queer women? I mean, queer women still can get pregnant. Queer women can still give birth. Queer women might disproportionately seek out in vitro fertilization. I mean, this decision is going to impact people who want to get pregnant, just as, along with people who don't want to be pregnant. I think people don't always realize it's both sides of the same coin. And overturning that law is really bad for a lot of other constitutional rights. Certainly, same-sex marriage can be challenged under the same ideology that overturned Roe versus Wade. Access to birth control and interracial marriage, as pathetic as that sounds, those are all protected under the same Privacy Act that Roe versus Wade made a constitutional right. All of those are now under question.
And one of the things I hope it's not TMI, but I can't get pregnant. And this decision was important because it talks about how our society sees women's bodies. Especially too, if you are not a cisgendered white male, how society views your body and the ability that we give our governments, our society, to control the bodies of people of color, of queer people. And that to me is very important, like the slippery slope effect. You know, even if you cannot get pregnant, this is saying the government has the right to control your body.
Just real quick, when this decision was leaked, we were still in the middle of, we were towards the end of the semester, and I was teaching my course called Masculinities. And I had a trans man in the room. And so I asked them, I came into class and I was like, all right, we're gonna just jettison everything we were gonna do today, and we're gonna talk about this decision, and how do you feel? And I'll never forget it. He's like, Kara, I can never leave the state. I'm a trans man. What Clarence Thomas wrote in his coordinating decision, I can never leave Massachusetts, but I can't afford to stay here. Like, because of the inflation and the housing crisis and all of that. And he was literally shaking. So, to that person on the web, I would say it's affecting queer people right now in a very real way.
And I'm just thinking too, what Kara was just saying, one of my students had mentioned too, I mean, if you are, a trans person, hormone treatments fall into the same category as a lot of drugs that could cause an abortion, just like IVF drugs. That's going to be a problem too. If you live in one of those 26 states that have trigger laws on the boards, that's going to be a problem too.
Yeah.
And I saw we had a question, Carl, right over in the second row, right there.
Hello, my name's Brandon, and I'm actually one of Professor K's students. The question I kind of have for the board today is this. As a young man, I was raised very Christian. I was raised very conservative. I have many religious friends, many Republican friends. And so my question is, how do we talk to these young men? Because I know I've been on the other side. I know what the idea. It's not, oh my God, religion and XYZ is influencing our judgment. It's oh my God, we need to protect children. We need to protect this, right? And it's incredibly hard for me to say to them, no, this, there's other things at play. And it's even harder because I've been ridiculed both when I was pro-life and pro-choice by pro-choice. So I guess the question I have is, how do we go to these religious groups, break the partisanship, and, kind of open up this new view to them?
So, hi.
Hi.
Thank you for coming. I'm so excited. And he wants to be a historian. Anyway, so one of the things, I actually said this in class, so one of the things that you might want to talk to religious Christians who, and I get it, I understand their point of view. They really, really, really do believe that they're protecting life, and I totally, totally understand that. However, we live in a democracy, right? And our Constitution, under the First Amendment, doesn't allow the establishment of religions by law, right? So, ironically, because of their deeply held belief, they're trying to use their religion as a motivation to try to get people to realize, oh my God, this is life, right? But if you allow the slippery slope of allowing one version of religion, and there's hundreds out there, right? One version of religion to be established under law, codify it, that means that other religious groups can do the same. And what if those religious groups are fundamentally against what every Christian believes, right? So it's the protection of the separation of church and state, which should be front and center for them, along with their belief in life, right? So to educate them on why the Establishment Clause is in the Bill of Rights, what it means, and even though your religion says this, all of the other religions, not all of them, but like Judaism, Islam, they don't agree when life happens, right? So how would you like it if one of the other religions came in and said, all right, now we're going to make laws based on our belief? So it's not defeating their belief, because A, that's not right, and B, you're not going to win. It's about the democracy for everybody.
And it's funny, Jen and I were just having this conversation literally last night. She asked, when someone asks the question, will you talk to religious people when they, are concerned with, saving the lives of what they presume are babies? And what I said is I would ask them, how would you feel if you were pregnant and someone said you had to have an abortion? Because that's the thing about choice. You can't have the choice to have a baby and have a pregnancy and deliver a baby without someone else having the choice not to. We live in a country that did, for a very long time, forcibly sterilize the disabled, incarcerated women, poor women, and women of color. We did that for a very, very long time. So someone's right not to have a baby is the same as another person's right to have a baby. I myself am a person with disabilities. I had to go through a lot of fertility treatments to have the kids that I have, but if we don't have reproductive choice, I wouldn't have been able to make the choice to have the children that I want. So I think you have to look at both sides of that coin. And there are other things too. I mean, if you look at it as a medical decision, there's already been people who have been denied cancer treatment drugs because they're classified somewhere under something that could potentially cause an abortion. There's so many other facets. I mean, if a woman is pregnant, her life should matter too, right? If people care about lives, and if the baby is not going to be a viable child and is risking their life, you got to think of that as well. We have a couple audience questions over here.
I don't really have a question. It was an answer to Brandon, right? It's not really about, I guess, abortion rights or pro-life or pro-choice. I just generally know your audience. I really, really know them. I know a lot of welders, a lot of Hicks. I want to say that feminism is not just for women. It's not just for minorities. It's also for men. It's a human right. We can allow people to do things that they want to do without being seen as feminine or, I'm going to use the word, pardon me, gay. It's transphobic. It's anti-feminist, it's sexist. People should be allowed to do what they want instead of being seen as weak, because these traits may be a stereotypical trait of the weaker communities, such as women and queer people. So I just want to say, if anyone, is anti-feminist in that specific audience, you can say, well, you are fighting for your rights by being a feminist as well.
When I was pro-life and when I was pro-choice, I was always belittled because of where I stand. I'm actually, I would say vicarious, but regardless, I will never forget, I was pretty much told I was less of a man because of the opinion I had. And it's so hard to convince these pro-life people as well, because I know what they've been told. I know what the mean things, and I mean, I know pro-life people also say really rude things, but even when I became pro-choice, I actually lost a friend because she was like, you're still a man, you still don't have an opinion on this. And I'm like, well, yeah, but like I have to say something, like this is clearly not, so, when you say to me, like, feminism and all of this stuff, it's kind of hard because in one ear, by these same people who are saying we're for equality, are the exact same people who belittled me, who pushed me down when I was slowly getting to that point, and who made that road longer. So sorry, I just had to say that because, sometimes I feel like, there are kind of two sides to that. So.
I saw Mary Beth's hand, and one of the things I want to speak to about what you both said, that when we were coming up with this, we used the term sexism and misogyny in the title. And I know I was very intentional about that, because everything that you are saying, and the Dobbs decision, in my opinion, is rooted in the devaluation of women and anything that's feminine. And this is the issue, I think, Brandon, that you had, is when men speak up for women or women's rights because they are valuing women, they then are devalued because we devalue women. But that's the thing about abortion and the question with, if you're queer, all of this comes down to a hatred and devaluation of women. So anytime you're going to support it, you are going to be seen as, because if any man has any what we call feminine qualities, you are seen as less than because we devalue those qualities. So.
Well, I just want to quickly say that I really admire that you're standing up for this cause, and it's a good cause. And you are no less of a man or a person. I really admire that.
Speak? Yes. So I'm Mary Beth. I take 2 courses right now, and I take 4, but 2 of my professors are here. And all of this is, so I get emotional. I got emotional watching it. I have a new granddaughter. I have a daughter. I have 2 sons who I've tried to raise to have their own choices, like don't listen to so-and-so say this, form your own opinions, get education. And here I am at 56, just like doing the education, and I don't know half of the stuff. So I think it's really important that women, young people, old, new, whatever, you have got to learn about this. I thought I was a feminist. I thought I knew. I was raised by a mother who was strong and independent. She was a therapist. She was a counselor. She was all these fabulous things. I thought I had all the information. I knew nothing until I took 2 of these classes. And it's so important because if we don't have the education, then we don't really, you can't form an opinion just by someone else's opinion. You have got to read about it, learn about it, find out if it's what you believe in, and then it's your opinion. It's not just because so-and-so says it. I have got to learn about women's rights. I have got to learn about, I don't know anything about the queer. When I took a first class, art class I've taken, I'll say this and I'll be quiet. This is where I'm at. I'm 56. I'm open. Like mold me, I'm a clay. But I go to art class and they say, identify your pronoun. And I said, what the hell is that? I said, Mrs. And I'm in the process of getting divorced right now, but I had no idea. And it's not like I'm oblivious to women's rights. I am strong and all this stuff. I had no idea what a pronoun was. So it's not just, and I agree with you, Professor, so much. It really is about keeping women down, control. And why do we have to be controlled? I'm so tired of it. I'm so tired of it. And I'm not going to have my daughter do it anymore. And I'll be damned if my granddaughter goes through this. So that's it.
Cool. I think about my own daughter, my oldest, with this decision, and it possibly be opening up the avenue to more decisions, and it impacts her threefold. She's a female, she's gay, her wife is an immigrant. Yeah. So I get the anger, but I think the thing we need to remember is to channel that anger into something positive to make change. And you need good allies. You need good men who will stand beside you, because fights are always best handled when you have allies. And if we try and do it alone, it's going to take a much longer struggle. And I've tried to explain that to other guys I know that they're like, oh yeah, I feel sorry for you. I'm like, okay, I don't want you to feel sorry. I want you to empathize. I want you to walk in my shoes. Once you walk in my shoes, or at least imagine yourself doing that, then think about what your opinion is. If you were a woman, would you like this? I mean, what would happen? What would the outcry be today if there was a law against men's reproductive rights? There would be some serious crap going down. People would be outraged. I'd be outraged. I wouldn't want somebody telling my son or my husband how to deal with that. But we need good men. We need good allies to stand alongside of us. So if you love a woman, you care about a woman, you have a special woman in your life, be there for her and be her ally.
And I'm just thinking back to the question about, like being ridiculed for being non-masculine, for, supporting feminism. And I think, I don't mean to repeat it all the time, but men aren't doing great in this capitalist society either, right? Like, it's not really benefiting most of us. And so if you look at what I say is white supremacist patriarchal capitalism, it's hurting men too. Mm-hmm. Men disproportionately are affected by violence. 90% of all violent crimes are committed by men, but it's usually men who are the victims of those crimes. Men die younger. They are less likely to support, they're less likely to seek therapy. They're less likely to talk about their feelings. They're way more likely to die of suicide. They're 5 times more likely to die of suicide by a gun. I mean, these are things to think of too. I mean, it's not great for anybody. So if we could work together to defeat what I call white supremacist patriarchal capitalism, but I mean, we're all being oppressed in so many ways.
Can you hear me? So I wanted to take another shot at Brandon's question. I think it's a very good question because I think it's here. What you're asking is basically how does someone who has felt one way, you know, basically pro-life, who has become pro-choice, how does that happen and how do I talk about that with others? I think probably the answer is a very difficult one, and probably you would know more than most because you have transitioned from one point of view to another. And so, you know, not that I want to throw the question back at you, but I think in whatever you went through in coming to that decision is probably a key. And I think I went through that myself. On the other hand, I think it's probably true that just like right now, I am firm in my beliefs. I know I'm not going to change. I mean, anybody can change, but I'm not going to. I also know that the other side of the argument, that people who are either for religious reasons or who just really believe it's a living baby that they want to protect, they feel so strongly about that that I have to be honest and say, it's probably not likely that I'm going to change their mind. They're not going to change my mind either. There are other people who might be more open and maybe would change just like you or I did. So let's just be honest that there are some people who are never going to change their minds. You probably want to have a follow-up to this, but I just wanted to point out that in some cases, I just want to be clear that it would probably be dangerous for me to express my opinion in certain groups. So while I do really want change, and I do think that there are avenues to it, I don't necessarily think it's a good idea for me to go into certain segments of the population and express my point of view. I don't think it should be like that, but I just have to recognize the times that we're in and recognize that the people who treated you poorly may not be the people that you want to necessarily invest the time in trying to change their minds, because it could put you in a bad situation, unfortunately. Just wanted to be honest.
Okay, I just want to clarify. People who treated me poorly were not pro-life. They were pro-choice. The people who belittled me, in my opinion, even when I became pro-choice. I actually lost a friend because, you know, I actually put on my story on Instagram, I said, you know, I get where you're coming from when the decision was overturned, but, you know, look, here's X, Y, and Z, and this person just said to me, you shouldn't have an opinion on this. You're a man. You shouldn't have an opinion on this, period. It doesn't involve you. And I have been met by some pro-choice people with that same sentiment. Now with that, to some people will never change. To put into context, when I say when I was pro-life, I mean like pro-life, like didn't believe in instances of rape, incest, like that pro-life. And slowly but surely, didn't happen immediately. And there's and to that, I really have to disagree that there aren't people. You know, there's really great TED Talk. It's by the name of it's like Darren something, and I don't know, and so it was this older gentleman, and so he has about, like, I think he has about 200 Ku Klux Klan robes that he convinced like 200 members through just talking to them and understanding where they came from. So I have to disagree that you know, I mean, obviously we can't get everybody, but I have to disagree. I think sometimes if you do go into the belly of the beast, you do understand, you do put compassion out there. I have to disagree. I think you can snag people. And I think that's why I sit as, you know, somebody who's pro-choice, because slowly but surely I gained, you know, compassion and understanding for the other side, and I went, oh my God, am I really going to force somebody to go through a painful birthing process? You know, so I respectfully have to disagree.
They sitting for this one, but I don't believe that there is separation of church and state within the United States. There is, you know, theoretically speaking, but most of the country has been founded on Christian ideals of, oh, we got to keep going, we got to keep manifest destiny was what, because God said so, right? They make us swear under oath when we get in court and all this stuff, and no, you know, it's just no. And religion is, I believe, why women are still very oppressed. And as long as those religious ideals are still within the system where we are separated from church and state, you know, nothing's going to move forward. I have nothing against religion. Religion is great. It served its purpose when it did, but we are at higher levels of understanding and teaching that, you know, if education was put into the Constitution and brought all over the country, people would actually try to understand, or they would have like something to be given to their thoughts.
So ironically, the religiosity, the amount of religiosity in the United States is dropping. And in fact, it's dropping worldwide. So while I agree with everything you just said, younger people, again, we're putting a lot on the youth here. Do your job. But if trends keep going, then, and as, you know, youth get older, you're going to see religion go down. And I think this is, you know, the way that the religious right of the Republican Party has been acting since 1980. It's almost from a fear point of view, almost like they're cornered and they know that they're not going to be as powerful. They got to do something now. And they've got the Federalist Society in order to groom Supreme Court justices so that when they get on the Supreme Court, they're going to have the, you know, this way of interpreting the Constitution that's just ridiculous. Anyway, so there's hope, I think, is in the data.
In line of the how to talk to the other side, for me, I find useful to think about or use critical thinking. You know, when in my classes, I like students, I make very clear when we talk about critical thinking, we need to learn to separate from opinions, ideas, beliefs versus facts. So in this context, and that's how I initially said, it is a matter of a right. So if you, like in your case, you've been in both sides. So if you ask, you know, like we in this society, we need to acknowledge religion and respect everyone is entitled to believe whatever you want. Is that right? And we need to supposedly acknowledge and respect that. But when you ask this person, okay, so you are taking this right from women, you know, and the right is the right to have an abortion. So what about if you, who want to have a baby, that right is taken from you? How do you feel if you don't have that right? So then, why someone is gonna take that right? So then we need kind to separate. So now when we talk about facts, so then we separate from the belief we just focus on the right as a right to be free, right to express, rights to do whatever I want with my body. So I think, for me, I think that could be helpful. Thank you.
And Michael, do we have any questions from the virtual audience?
We do. There's a statement. A person who's extremely upset by the topic. And then there's kind of a lengthy statement that I want to read verbatim. So let me do that. Quote, I think it is really important to keep in mind that folks will lose their lives as a result of this Supreme Court decision. For folks who talk about the dangers of expressing their opinions, just know this issue particularly is going to cost the lives of pregnant people. On the scale of danger, keep that in mind. This is a war on bodily autonomy, and it is cisgendered white men against everyone else, unquote.
When I hear you say that, I can't help but think that this really isn't about the right to protect unborn children. I mean, if anybody thinks that that is the only thing behind this decision, they're missing the big picture. It's all about control. If we were really, really, as a society, concerned about unborn children, wouldn't we be doing more to protect the children who are here? Wouldn't we be doing more to protect pregnant mothers?
Yeah. Yep.
You know, but instead you'll have, not all, but some people in that same camp, the minute the child's born, they're trash, they're welfare, they're sucking off the system. They've got to decide what it is that they actually want. This is. I'm sorry, I'm a recovering Catholic. And I think there's been a lot of harm religion has done, and that some people who they truly believe that, you know, we have to protect these unborn children. I believe that they really feel that way. But I guarantee you, if all of these women who can't have abortions started dropping off children off at their doorstep, they go, oh, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think it's hard for people to really understand that if for a medical reason or in the case of rape or incest, or even if you're at a time in your life where you cannot afford or you are not mentally able to raise a child because it's going to cause a severe disruption in your life, people need to consider that, because half the population never has to think about that. Exactly. Half the population doesn't have to make a job decision on whether or not they can keep their job because they're pregnant. Mm-hmm. If you look at women in the military, right? I have a new course that's coming out, and I've been doing a lot of research into women in the military, right? So they just fought to overturn a lot of the rulings that kept them out of combat. They can now go into combat. How is this going to send them backwards? Mm-hmm. What if they're ready to go off to war? You know, take your child to war day. I mean, there's a much bigger picture here that I think we need to just take off our blinders, and it's up to us to not let this democracy slide backwards any more than it already has.
And I mean, not for nothing, like, we live in a country that has one of the worst maternal mortality rates in the Western world. For Black women, it's 3 times as bad. Like, if you are a Black woman, your rates of dying, and this is in 2022. We live in a state that has some of the best medical experts in technology. It comes to, like, not caring about women. And if we cared about women, there's actually a group that I am always very interested in. It's Catholics for Choice. And I also am a recovering Catholic. And I've always been fascinated with nuns. And some of the nuns, they go around the country. It's called Nuns on a Bus. And they're nuns who do support reproductive freedom. Nuns can be pretty badass. And their, take is, if we actually lived in a country that had choice, because women, when they were pregnant, we gave them what they needed. They had the food that they needed. They had the economic support, the financial support, the emotional support. When the kids were born, their kids aren't going to starve to death. They're not going to be homeless. We would help them out of an abusive relationship. Then maybe we could talk about whether or not to give birth as a choice, but women right now don't have that choice.
And I also wanted to say something about, again, one of my fields of expertise is masculinity studies, and a lot of, we have to be careful of language, okay? So when we keep when we keep denigrating or putting everything on the shoulders of cisgendered men, this is men's fault. When Brandon is saying your friend is not allowing you to have an opinion because you happen to have male reproductive parts, that's unacceptable. Feminism is not that. Okay? So what's the problem is an idea that has become a reality, and that's patriarchy, right? So patriarchy affects all bodies. It affects all genders. Maybe not all the same, but it affects men, cisgendered or queer or what have you as well. It's an idea, it's a behavior, it's a way of producing power and control, and it's getting worse. I just seriously want to tell people, when you talk about this, don't put men down. Put the ideas down. Put patriarchy down. That's all.
And on that note, I just checked the time, but thank you all. This has been a really productive conversation. I know it's almost 12:30. I really enjoyed it. I want you to know that there will be a part 2 to this. So this is part 1. There'll be a part 2. It'll be somewhere in the spring, sometime in April. We haven't picked a date yet, but we're hoping to have maybe a little bit of a bigger program in the spring. But keep the conversation going. Just look any of us up on the North Shore System. Happy to talk to you more. And thank you for coming.
Thank you.